What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Mtg, we like it, a magic, all that stuff. Guess what? It's Sunday of the same week. What? A new set just came out in it. You know what that means. That means that all the weekend tournaments are finishing up. We got a few MTGO League results and standard challenges to sift through, and there was a lot to sift through, but it's all worth it, and it's all pretty exciting to me, right? It warms my heart after so long not seeing a brand new standard. I don't know what any of these accents are, sorry, but it does. It does make me feel very happy that not only did we get rotation and that had this massive impact on standard, but despite what some people thought might happen, Bloomburrow had a pretty massive impact on standard too. So again, a lot to look at today, and I intend to do just that. Best new decks of the week. Let's go.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck techs. I come correct like a porn star, slicing up all these other suckers with my sword mark.
And we're back. Like and make sure you sub to the sandwich. But quick disclaimer, as usual, when I do these videos, this is not going to be a video about the absolute best decks in this new environment. I will do a little bit about that at the end. Don't worry, stay to the end. You'll be rewarded with that. We're going to talk about what decks you should be looking out for. But if you've been playing Magic the last couple of days, then you probably already know what decks to look out for. Again, we'll talk about it. But actually, this video is always about like the coolest new decks of the week that got the best results, and hopefully because they got such good results, they'll continue to repeat those results and just be cool decks that we never get sick of, right? We'll see. But either way, what we're going to do first is not look at any of the decks on your screen. I know you've been looking at them with your prying eyes. Stop cheating. Get out of here. Cut it out. What we're actually going to do is look at our kind of honorable mention deck. Not the only creature type deck that we'll look at today, but I am very proud of Lizards. Yeah, I was over here on Melee because it has the darker screen. It doesn't assault your eyes with this white background. I don't know why MTGO is stuck in this age of web design, but here we are. This is by Ura First. They got 9th place, just barely out of the top 8, but they were very close with their Rakdos Lizards build here, which is actually a pretty cool little build, but also a very straightforward one, which is one of the reasons why it's my honorable mention. It's also my honorable mention because it got 9th place, which is a pretty good result for a standard challenge. I trust standard challenges more than league results. Most decks can 5-0 on a good day, you know what I mean? Their opponents get like poorly mana, screwed or whatever, or you just get the best cards in your deck every game. A 5-0 doesn't mean nothing, but a good placement in a challenge event means a little bit more to me, especially if you can repeat those things. And this isn't the only finish in a standard challenge already this season for a Lizards deck. I believe actually that in the top 16 or 17, there's another one. So it's not the winningest deck in the world, but it's also not the losingest. I just make up words sometimes, but still, this has everything that you'd expect to see. I've got Iridescent Vine Lasher on screen because I love it, and this is just about the only build that Vine Lasher showed up in over the weekend. There were some green-black builds with Aftermath Analyst and Lumra and stuff, but they didn't do as well as some of the other Golgari builds. Again, we'll discuss that a little bit later. But in this deck, you've got your Iridescent Vine Lasher, the landfall, deal a damage to an opponent guy. You got Fireglass Mentor in here, which is kind of a way to get card advantage in this deck out of your 2-drop. Always cool. Flame Cash Gecko is the new Burning Tree Emissary you may have heard about. That extra mana can be used in a ton of ways. The only non-lizard creature in the deck is Forsaken Miner, which is an interesting thing to be doing. I kind of like it. You've also got Gev's Scaled Scorch in here. This really pays off your lizard stuff, but also all your other creatures enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. So that's an interesting line for Commander. I've never noticed it was worded that way. So if you have 3 other people lose life, then all your guys enter with an additional 3 +1/+1 counters. That's pretty good. But still, wow. But still, I guess this does make your Forsaken Miner a little more swole, I guess, some of the times. That's kind of nice. But Hard Claw is in here, a lizard payoff, just extra incremental damage. Note how much incremental damage there is in the deck. You're getting 1 damage at a time off of Gev. You're getting 1 damage at a time off of Hard Claw, 1 damage at a time off of Vine Lasher. Laughing Jasper Flint is a lizard, but you may have noticed, just in case you haven't, I'll tell you right now, that most of the creatures in the deck are outlaws. I believe all of the creatures in the deck are outlaws. So a sneaky outlaws deck here. So, X being the number of outlaws you control can be like a bunch. It can be so many in this deck. And Flint actually has pretty decent stats too, just as from the start. He's not bad. But Thoughtstalker Warlock also in here. Been seeing him in a lot of discard builds here and there on Arena. But He's here in the lizard build too because, he's a lizard and a pretty good one too. There's really not a whole lot of removal in this deck or like ways to really interact with your opponent. So it's pretty nice to have this thing in here. But there is Bitter Triumph as well as 4 Go for the Throat. So this aggro deck does end up playing 6 main deck removal spells, and that's something. It's not nothing, you know what I mean? So I guess there is like some interaction in the deck. There's a fair amount of early drops too, right? You've got like 12. Yeah, Iridescent Vine Lasher, Hard Claw, and Forsaken Miner. So tons of ones in here, and a lot of them are capable of dealing a fair amount of damage over the course of a game. Plus your 2-drop, you can go Flame Cash Gecko into any of your 2-drops or even 2 1-drops, and then you're just on the board, right? So yeah, lizards seem like the most explosive, I guess, creature type towards the beginning of when we were all kind of theory crafting these decks. And the first couple of days of the season, we ended up playing against, quite 2 or 3 different lizards decks on stream, so this deck is a known quantity. People are trying to hammer out the right numbers and all that, but sure looks like just play all the best lizards is kind of the answer right now and cut the lands down to 22, right? So the deck does also play Mudflat Village and Rockface Village, the red and black villages, just the 1 Rockface, 2 Mudflats. 32 creatures is probably about how many you have to play to work like 3 whole villages into your deck, right? But while you can, you might as well do that. Being able to bring back lizards from your graveyard is pretty sick. So altogether, a nice little aggro build. Not the best aggro build, I think, in Standard right now, is all my opinion, man. But probably not the premier aggro deck in the format, but one that was surprisingly good. I think better than a lot of us assumed it would be. Well, let's move on to one of my actual kind of new decks of the week here. I think this one shows promise, but I am very concerned. It's a flash in the pan. That said, you can't argue with results, and Matsukasa 10 got 3rd place in a Standard challenge with this infamous Cru Claw Discover build. And this is just a really, really neat deck here, guys. Now, Infamous Cru Claw is kind of the premier 3-drop that's in this deck. This is the 3/3 with Menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you exile from the top of your library till you hit a non-land, and you can cast it if you discard a card. You can cast it without paying its mana cost if you discard a card. So how do we make that work? My thought was that maybe the best way to mess around with this card would be to just have it be a decent 3-drop in an otherwise mid-range deck, right? Maybe a couple of big things for it to play, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing here, but taken to kind of the next step, right? Because this is also a Discover deck that does not play any actual 2-drops, but it still has 12 2-drops. And I think that's a really, really interesting conceit. You've got Geological Appraiser in here, right? This discovers 3, so you want it to get the full amount of value when it comes into play. Every single time, right? You want to be able to get a 3-drop, so you might be able to get your one of Geth rather, that's in here. And then Geth just can reanimate dudes for you, which is very, very cool. But aside from that, you've also got Gloom Fang Mauler in here. This is a 2-drop. It swamp cycles for 2. So you discard it, you search for a swamp, put it in your hand, shuffle. That's probably what you're going to be doing with it most of the time. But Geth can get it back, and of course, Cru Claw can just cast it for free. 5/5, 7/7 really, with Menace. And sometimes it'll use its backup to back up Cru Claw. And now you got a 5/5, right? So that's difficult. You have 2 5/5s effectively. So an interesting call to play this card here, and I see the reasons why you'd want to do it. Again, cool 2-drop. But there's also Harvester of Misery. This is also a 2-drop in that you can just pay 2, discard it, and a creature gets -2/-2 till end of turn. But of course, this can also be gotten back with Geth. This can be cast for free with Harvest for the infamous Cru Claw, and it doesn't kill the Cru Claw, which I think is really, really neat. Shelter the Apocalypse is in here because why not? We're red-black. Let's play this card. And then Trumpeting Carnosaur, which you can hit off of Cru Claw as well, or again reanimate with the Geth. I think that's a neat line. You can discard it in the early game for damage, right? And then reanimate it with Geth. All very, very cool. But, Virtue of Persistence is in here too. Again, this is a 7-drop that can be recast or just cast for free with Cru Claw, and then it can start reanimating your Discover creatures and your Trumpeting Carnosaurs and Sheldrids and Harvesters and Gloom Fangs, all that stuff. But it can also just be your 2-drop, which is good. That's just solid. You've also got Gix's Command as a 4 of over here, which is very sexy. This might actually be one of the best ways to get Cru Claw through because, you put 2 counters on Cru Claw, right? and then just blow up all the 2-drop creatures or whatever it is, the 2 power creatures, and get through that way. Or maybe you just go, blow up all the creatures power 2 or less and sack your largest dude, and that just makes your Cru Claw get through like free and clear, So again, interesting call to play 4 of this. It's kind of your sweeper in your, mid-range deck. It's very good in that capacity. But there's also a bunch of creatures in the deck that you might want to return, so that ability is good too. Also, Binding Negotiation. I had to look up what this card did when I first saw it. So I was looking at it on my phone and I couldn't highlight it. It's different on mobile. But anyway, Binding Negotiation is 2 mana for a sorcery. An opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land from it. If they do, discard it. Otherwise, you can put a face-up exiled card they own into their graveyard. I still haven't really figured it out. I still haven't quite figured this out. At all. I guess... I don't know. I mean, maybe just because it's a good discard piece, you can take the Sunfall out of their hand or something like that. But I don't know, dog. But there are other weird bones I have to pick with this deck. Geological Appraiser. If you want to, let's say you curve Cru Claw into Appraiser, and then Appraiser just hits a Cru Claw, and you're like, man, I feel like this is going to happen a lot. Same thing with Trumpeting Carnosaur. You Trumpeting Carnosaur because you got it off of Cru Claw. You just hit a Cru Claw and you're like, come on. So I don't know. But I do think it's an interesting red-black mid-range deck. One like this kind of already existed before rotation happened. And it wasn't half bad, right? So I don't have all of the fates, but I want to have fates. By the way, I didn't even point out the Chimil in this deck. It's the infamous Cru Claw can cast, or you can just cast it yourself and get Carnosaurs off of it and stuff. So, well, actually you can't get Carnosaurs, but you can get more Cru Claws and stuff. You can get a Geth or an Appraiser off of it, which is cool. So interesting call to play the 1-up Chimil in here, but let's move on because we got Orzo Babies to talk about. You guys know how much I love Orzo. Welcome to the channel if you don't. I talk about it way too much, but faz parte first place in a standard challenge, everybody. So Orzo is not to be denied, and this has a few cards that I'm actually extremely excited are in this deck. First of all, this is just kind of an Orzo mid-range deck. No real, tie that binds here, which I kind of like about it, but there are some interesting newer cards in this deck and some cards that we've had access to for a while that it's cool to see here, right? So it's kind of a mono black deck, right? It's got the Aklizots in it. It's got the 2 Sheldreds in it. It's got 2 Preacher of the Schism. You expect to see all these things. Even a Harvester of Misery shows up. 1 copy of Gix shows up in this deck because we're also playing 4 Deep Cavern Bat. That's a great 2-3 curve right there. So all the hits from mono black, right? You got your Go for the Throat, cut down 4-3 package. Used to seeing that, right? Virtue of Persistence, the 1-of, used to seeing that Silver Bullet, baby. But this is where it starts getting very weird because now we got to talk about the white cards in the deck. This is the first time we're seeing Basa. And Basa actually is one of the most played new cards from Bloomburrow. This particular Orzo deck, or one like it, is getting a lot of play right now, whether they're 5-0ing leagues or placing in standard challenges. I'm just showing you the one that's done the best. This Orzo deck is being iterated on every hour by the hour to find the best build. And this build does not play like Caustic Bronco, but this deck has been playing Caustic Bronco at a pretty, reliable clip so far this season. But, that could change. This build didn't do it, and again, has done the best. It does play a Silver Bullet Doorkeeper Thrall. Interesting, right? Especially in a deck with a couple of things that do have ETB triggers. But it's also got a single Dust Animus as a bullet point. I like that, too, Dust Animus is a cool Magic card. But despite all the 1-ofs, it's got a lot to do with them. The Shrouded Shepherd's in here to take care of aggro decks. I think this is an interesting 1-of to main deck. And then Zoraline Cosmos Collar. Brand new card, just like Basa. Brand new, right? But this one we're seeing pop up an awful lot too. In all of the Orzo mid-range decks that Basa shows up in, Zoraline shows up in. And the deck I'm going to show you in just a second actually leverages Zoraline even better than this deck. But Zoraline is one of the breakout cards of Bloomburrow. It's just a very good value 3-drop that's good as a 3 or even a 5-drop if you want to make sure it does get you some value the turn that it comes out. So it's got a few different slots on curve, and I like that about it. If you have Preacher and Zoraline, you don't have to worry about it. Just play the Preacher first and then Zoraline, especially considering they'll have killed your Preacher by then, by hook or by crook, right? And then Zoraline can just get your Preacher back, which is great. But it can get back most of the dudes in the deck, too. Just Zoraline getting back a Deep Cavern Bat is a pretty great line, right? Doorkeeper Thrall, Dust Animus, Gix, all these are creatures that can be gotten back by Zoraline's ETB/attacks trigger. The life actually matters, too, because not only is Zoraline attacking, but so is Deep Cavern Bat. Bats from Aklazats in this deck are also attacking, so not quite a Bats deck. Again, this is mostly a not entirely asynergistic pile, but close enough. But one of the cards that I really want to point out in here that's brand new is Season of the Burrow. You laughed at me. I saw so many people. I made this card like number 20 something, like number 28, 29 on my top 50. And there's people all up in the comments being like, dude, Season of the Burrow sucks. It's terrible, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Season of the Burrow? Are you dumb? And no, you're dumb like a fox. I knew this card would be special. And it's not just in this version of the deck. I believe in this particular standard challenge, there are, if I'm not mistaken, 6 copies in the top 16. In a different standard challenge, there are 4 copies in the top 8. So Season of the Burrow is here to stay. A lot of people, hit me for my comparison to Casualties of War. And I know that it's not all the same, right? But you are taking out 2 permanents, 2 non-land permanents, whatever you want that's non-land on the table. And you're trading them, for cards. Your opponent gets cards. But you're taking out one of the most important things they put in their deck for their game plan, and they're drawing God knows what, right? They're playing the lottery, and you're getting rid of their best thing. So again, I think that's very good, especially in times where like all you have to do is take care of one thing, and then you can use the 3-paw mode, or you can use the 1-paw mode 3 times. Like that's good board presence. So again, I think this card's modality and the strength of all of its modes when you total them up, really makes it something special, and it has been seeing a good amount of play, whether it's a 1 of or a 2 of in these Orzo Midrange decks. These Midrange decks, just one last thing, they play a lot of creatures, so they don't want to play like Sunfall or Deadly Cover-Up or something like that. So this isn't a sweeper, but it does take out the 2 best creatures on the other side of the table, clear the board for your attack step, right? Or just anything, right? Just take the 2 best things off their side of the table. But this can also get back like Zoraline, while also creating like 2 rabbits. And that's like really good board presence. You get back a Gix and create 2 rabbits. Incredible, dude. But yeah, the normal removal package and a bunch of like good black-white creatures all tied together by mostly Zoraline, to be honest. It's the actual reason, I believe, why this deck is Zorzov, is so it can play Zoraline. So, been talking about it for too long, but this is probably the deck that we're looking at this week that did the absolute best. It's the only first place deck that we're looking at. That said, this was a standard challenge. And even though I take those pretty seriously, to be honest with you, I don't take them quite as seriously as large tournaments. And we had a 113-person entry for the Is It Explosive Experiment event. This time, we actually got some very interesting results. These are, from the beginning of the video. Again, 113 people showed up at this event. You see that Monor Red Midrange got 9-1. We'll look at that in a second. Azorius Control 7-3. The jerk playing, I don't know. Shuhei's great, but, so they're still figuring out how to make Azorius Control work this early in the format. You see Boris Convoke is still a thing. You even see that Domain Ramp is still a thing. You see Golgari Midrange twice on your screen. It's one of the most played decks in the early days of the format. Again, Golgari. It's really more of a mono black deck that splashes green for like 2 cards. But yeah, let's look at my favorite deck of the week. It's Orzo Midrange. Now it's labeled Orzo Midrange, but it's not the deck we just looked at. This is by Madoka Hajime. This is actually a pretty different deck. Now it does play some of the same cards, right? It's got your Go for the Throats. It's got your Cut Downs. You expected those. It's got your Deep Cavern Bat, right? But that is honestly kind of where all similarities stop entirely, because the deck has 2 Liliana of the Veil that the other deck did not have. It's got, the Zoraline. I should have pointed out the Zoraline. It does have 4 Zoraline in it, but that's because it is, ladies and gentlemen, a bat deck. Not a bad deck. It's a bat deck. And it went 7-2 and got 3rd place at a 113-person event. Bat's pretty impressive. Honestly, I'm just saying, this is all right, dude. Zoraline is really showing how good of a card it is in the early runnings here. It's just fantastic, especially alongside Deep Cavern Bat. They are best friends, but you also get a 1-drop that's halfway decent Ruin Lurker Bat. This is a 1/1 flying lifelink, so a Healer's Hawk right there. But also, if you descend it at the beginning of your end step, you get to scry 1. And that's just not bad. That's pretty good gravy, dude. But there's also Essence Channeler, a bat in this deck, kind of the new Voice of the Blessed. Darkstar Augur, a new Bob that you can offspring and draw like a bunch of cards. This deck is relatively low on curve, so you're never going to be spending like too much life to draw these cards. And again, it's a bat. It's got Lunar Convocation, the brand new enchantment that's kind of like a little bit Dawn of Hope, a little bit Bitter Blossom, kind of a Batter Blossom, you know what I mean? Just extra incremental damage every turn because you're going to be gaining life most turns. And then if you can lose life during your turn, then you get to make another bat. You make a 1/1 bat. Of course, you can pay the 2 life and draw a card, thus almost ensuring a bat. That's pretty cool, but there's other ways of losing the life. Case of the Uneaten Feast finds a pretty good spot, like a home in this deck. You know, there's no Amalia in this deck or anything. It's kind of a life gain deck with no Amalia, which is wild, you know. But we'll talk about what 2-drop Legend in Orzhov they played in just a second. We'll get to. You'll notice that I skipped over it. But yeah, it's a great Case of the Uneaten Feast deck. Sweet to get this down on turn 1. You'll play a creature on curve like for the rest of the game most turns until you run out of cards in your hand. And then like this can get back like every single creature in the deck at a pretty low price. You know, like if you have solved this and you have 5 mana, you can get back like 2-3 guys really easily. So yeah, dude, fully support Case of the Uneaten Feast. But the removal package is Bitter Triumph, Go for the Throat, Cut Down. We talked about that. But the other card in the deck is Ellis Silor, my fiance. You know, she's finally, maybe it is finally her time to step up from the mid card, right? And take your place among the true top tier, like champions in Standard. I would love that, dude. Put a belt on her because she deserves it. 2 of Ellis Silor in this deck, just really sweet with all of your, you know, different creatures that are coming into play, right? You're going to have a bunch of creatures die too, obviously. All of them are removal targets. So it's just extra, you know, incremental damage. Love that this is in here. You know, it's got Death Touch. You can throw it in front of stuff willy-nilly and then just get it back later with Zoraline. That's awesome. So really, really cool shell for Ellie, and I fully support her. And no matter what she wants to do, I fully support her. That's called being a good partner. Zoraline and Ellis Silor, just like, what an amazing deck, dude. And it plays Lunar Convocation. Like, this is my deck now. This is the deck I'm playing for the rest of the season. So, of course, it's number 1. But let's go back and look at Monor Red Midrange for a second, because it's not what you think it might be. You might think it's some sort of mislabeled deck, but no, it actually is Monor Red Midrange. There's 3 Koth, Fire of Resistance in this deck. Isn't that nuts? There's also 4 Hired Claw, though, which I think is neat. Charming Scoundrels in here, Monastery Swift Spear, Sunspine Lynx as a 3 of. It's new 4-drop. Players can't gain life, and it does damage equal to like the number of non-basics when it comes into play. It's also got Grabby Giant to help ramp, and it's just a good mid-range creature. Urbrass Forge to actually win a game from time to time. Obliterating Bolt, Scorching Shot, Shock, Lightning Strike to go to the top, and all that, you know. There's just not a whole lot of ways to kill large dudes except for Obliterating Bolt. Scorching Shot is kind of neat as a 1-of because it can blow up Sheldrids, you know, pre-sideboard. So again, not exactly the deck you might have been thinking of. You know, oh, it's just mislabeled Monor Red. No, this is a mid-range deck. It plays 8 1-drops. It's something you don't see every day, but we're doing it. You know. Plus, there's Azorius Control. There's Boris Convoke, Domain Ramp, Golgari, right? Like I said, I might do a separate videos on these because I think that in terms of the numbers in the early game, most of the decks on screen that I haven't talked about are the ones that you really have to be looking out for. If you actually want to know what decks are good, it's Golgari, Orzhov, Mono Red or some variant of, usually that plays green, right? You'll see the red-green deck that has like Audacity, sometimes Picnic Ruiner, often Snakeskin Veil or Royal Treatment or some other savior like dude spell. So these are the decks you actually want to look out for. Hope that you enjoyed this. It was kind of a lot of video, but I expected it to be. There's just so much to talk about. Like right after rotation, new awesome set just came out. So just let me know if you got any like new builds that you want me to talk about or what down there. How you felt about all my takes and blah, 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 right? It's your turn, your go. I'm tapped out. Hit me with all of your takes and stuff. But It's basically all I got for this one, guys. Just sub to the sandwich. Make sure you like the video. Check out the Patreon if you want to support the content. It's just $1 a month. And for that, you'll be able to vote on what content we do around here. So it's worth something. I'm worth $1. Come on, man. But anyway, that's all I got for this one, guys. Just hit me up in the comments with any thoughts or concerns or any super special tech that I'm not aware of. It could be. But still. Anyway, guys, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here is what I tried to say there. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love. Be kind.